أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي شهري صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. My dear elders, brothers and sisters, Salamun Alaikum. Ayatollah Khoei was born on the 19th of November 1899 in the city of Khoei, which is West Azerbaijan, but part of Iran at the time. He moved to Najaf at the age of 13 and began studying Shia theology. There were few scholars of his level. In fact, there are no scholars I can see history of who before they became a marja, others had dreams about of his level. I won't go into the dreams now. Suffice to say that Ayatollah Khoei also had a dream about himself when he was a very young student in Najaf, about how one day he would be wonderful. And others had as well. Others saw dreams of the 12th Imam appearing in their dream, explaining that this wonderful marja, Syed Abul Qasim al-Khoei, would come ahead of them. I won't go into them now because we will be short of time. Ayatollah Khoei studied under very notable scholars. Scholars like Ayatollah Isfahani, Ayatollah Naini, Ayatollah Araki, and of course Ayatollah Sayyid Mohsin al-Hakim. Ayatollah Khoei once described his scholars. He said, "I've learnt from each and one of them a complete course in the science of usul and digested from them in the science of fiqh. I was one of a few who would critique the research of these scholars who specialized in this branch of knowledge. Al-Naini was my last mentor, and I used to accompany him more frequently than anyone else." Ayatollah Khoei became a mujtahid at the age of 20. In his late 20s, about 25 to 27. In 1971, when Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim passed away, Ayatollah Khoei became the Maraja, the global Maraja. And at the time there were other, more established scholars who were better known, scholars who had studied longer. But they all decided that Ayatollah al-Khoei would be the Maraja, and this is due to his intellectual knowledge, recognized by his own peers. Very quickly, if we go into his works, I don't want to go into too much detail on it because we have so much to cover on his life. But in all, he had 90 significant pieces of work. The one to really pick out of all of them, which are all very, very deep and used today, the key one is Muajjam Rijal al-Hadith, which without doubt and no exaggeration at all is the most useful book today on Ilmul Rijal. It has 24 volumes, includes profiles of 15,676 narrators of ahadith. So it was significant work, especially significant when it talks about the narrators of the Kutubul Arba as well. Interestingly enough, and this is a charge made against Marja'iyya, that our Maraji do not change their opinions. Once they give an edict, they stick by it. Well, this is quite false. Many times Ayatollah Khoei was challenged to change his fatwa. For example, he was challenged on his book Kamilul Ziyarat, and he changed it based on the viewpoints of his students. So many a times his students would give him opinions, give him viewpoints, and he was open-minded enough to change his mind. Very, very different if you look at all religions of main scholars. One of Ayatollah Khoei's legacies are the level of students that he left. Very few Maraji of the 20th century can boast that this level of students have been left. When Ayatollah al-Hakim passed away, Ayatollah Khoei gained the administration of the Najaf Hawza, and he brought it up to about 8,000 students at its peak. Let's look at an example of Dars-e-Kharj. Dars-e-Kharj is given by somebody who is a mujtahid to students of a very high caliber. And often to prepare for one Dars-e-Kharj, it would take maybe 18 hours, maybe 20 hours, maybe a couple of days. Ayatollah Khoei held 4 Dars-e-Kharj commonly a day. He was able to give pages and pages of information on all his fatwa and ask for challenges. He used to go into his Dars-e-Kharj and tell his students like Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Ishaq Fayyad, Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir Sadr, he used to tell them, come and challenge me. Come and challenge me on my fatwa. And they were all quite anxious to be in front of such a knowledgeable personality. His students include Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Mirza Jawad Tabrizi, Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, Ayatollah Mahdi al-Hakim, Ayatollah Fadlallah, Imam Musa Sadr, Ayatollah Baharul Ulum, Ayatollah Bahesti, Ayatollah Mohsini, who is running a wonderful hawza today just outside Kabul in Afghanistan, Ayatollah Bashir Najafi, Ayatollah Wahid Khorastani, Ayatollah Ishaq Fayyad, Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi Bahjat, Ayatollah Khomeini. I could continue. Almost 150 students have studied under Ayatollah Khoei of extreme caliber. His students used to call him Ustad, and there's a lot of things written about Ayatollah Khoei from his students. So for example, Sheikh Mughniya writes, he was like the sun that sends its rays everywhere, all the time. He was the pivot around which the motion of scholarship revolved, and to whom the Hawza is indebted for appreciation and loyalty. His was the golden age. Sayyid Sistani writes and says today, he is the sun whose light continues to guide us. Ayatollah Ishaq Fayaz has written a whole chapter in favor of Al-Khoei, and he says, today the Najaf Hawza's prosperity is due and its thawab goes to the soul of Ayatollah Al-Khoei. His students held him in such amazing standing. But if we look at the achievements of Ayatollah Al-Khoei, we would only really understand his legacy if we understood the oppression that the Ba'athist regime put him under, and why and what he did to protect the seminary. Abbas Kazim, who has written a book very recently called The Hawza Under Siege, has analyzed 10 million Ba'athist documents. Now the Ba'athists, the way they ran Iraq was every decision, every meeting, the minutes were written, every recommendation was written, everything was put into writings. So 10 million documents have been gathered. Today they're held at the Stanford University's Hoover Institute. And these documents give us and gave Abbas Kazim a good introduction into the structure of the Ba'ath Party, how they made decisions, what atrocities they committed. And it is really interesting of the way they viewed the Hawza and the way they viewed the threat of Ayatollah Al-Khoei. The first person to do a study on behalf of Saddam was Izzat ad-Duri, who was Saddam's closest advisor and one of his deputies. And Izzat ad-Duri's report on the Hawza looked at 3 points. He looked at number one, could Ayatollah Al-Khoei be expelled from Iraq, and can the Hawza be closed? Secondly, could a Ba'athist, Arab nationalist Shia replacement be groomed who could take over the Hawza and remove Ayatollah Al-Khoei? And thirdly, could the Hawza come under the state, and what steps were necessary to close them off? And so a lot of debate happened within the Ba'athists between 1983 and 1988. And they did their level best to push Khoei out of Najaf and push him either to Qum or to Lebanon or to wherever, but they wanted him out of Iraq. And Ayatollah Al-Khoei was once asked by someone, why are you resisting leaving Najaf? Why not go to Qum, where there is already a center of learning and soon to be a Shia government? And Ayatollah Khoei's response is that 1,000 or so years of work from the great Sheikh Tushti will now perish. The Najaf Hawza is today the backbone of our madhab. And if we want to see, and if we say that Sheikh Tusi was great in finding the Najaf and founding the Najaf Hawza, then Ayatollah is as great for maintaining, developing and nurturing it. Saddam Hussein was frustrated, very, very, very frustrated at Ayatollah Al-Khoei. And he could not expel him, so then later on he personally writes a policy called Containment of Khoei. And this policy of containment, Saddam and Izzat spell out as being number one, extreme pressure on Ayatollah Al-Khoei and his representatives, including periods of house arrest. Secondly, surveillance of the Hawza, including infiltration of the Hawza at junior levels. Thirdly, the continual execution of Khoei's associates. Fourthly, prohibition of teaching in Farsi. The Ba'athists were very insecure about Farsi. And fifthly, the deportation of foreign students. The report writes that Saddam wanted to, in comments, compel Al-Khoei to declare his unambiguous position towards Khomeini. He wanted Khoei to write a fatwa against Khomeini. And he even writes, the report writes, that the party, i.e. the Ba'athist party, was working on promoting Arab elements inside the Hawza to ensure that an Arab sympathetic to the Ba'athists would take over the Hawza. But in the same report, they later conclude that it would be impossible for someone to emulate Ayatollah Al-Khoei. It would take 20 years, if not more. And so it was impossible to infiltrate the Hawza at the highest level. But Saddam and the Ba'athists made the Hawza life very, very difficult. There were 8,000 students when Ayatollah Mohsen al-Hakim was there, only 200 at the peak of the Ba'athist regime. 12 institutes were there in Najaf when Ayatollah Mohsen al-Hakim was there, only 2 when Ayatollah Al-Khoei was there. Saddam wanted to make sure, and his policy read, to contain these schools and completely end their role gradually by opening other schools as much as possible and taking them away from Ayatollah Al-Khoei. So one of the threats to Ayatollah al-Khoei's Hawza that he was running was infiltration. And this was something that Saddam put a lot of effort in. He writes, "The special emphasis without doubt is the aim at advancing and selecting Shia members of the Ba'ath Party to join the Hawza, disguised as students in the normal course of religion, and to later cultivate them and ascend the Hawza leadership." 12 candidates were identified, but there is no evidence at all that they managed to infiltrate the Hawza at all. Saddam not only wanted to infiltrate the Hawza or corrupt the Hawza, his policy was also to monitor and attack Ayatollah Khoei's wakils. He had a list drawn up by Izzat of who were Ayatollah al-Khoei's hostile wakils. Historians today, when you read the biography of Ayatollah al-Khoei, they will tell you Ayatollah al-Khoei was a quietist. They say the same about Syed Sistani, same about Ayatollah Ishaq Fayaz. They say that they were under quietism. But the question is, how do you define quietism? Whilst Ayatollah al-Khoei did not ask people to take up arms against Saddam, he was totally against the corrupt regime. He may not have called for a revolution, but he was defiant against Saddam. There are many, many examples of this. One example is where Izzat ad-Duri visits Ayatollah Khoei and asks for his support in one of Saddam's wars. Ayatollah Khoei replies very categorically, "I will not change my opinion, nor do anything you force me to do. You better kill me. If you kill me, I will become a martyr, and you will be cursed for killing an old man like me." Examples of Ayatollah al-Khoei's standing are there. After the Kuwait war, a lot of looting took place. A lot of people took back cars, a lot of people took back other belongings. There were many people who took back Mercedes S-classes from Kuwait. And Ayatollah al-Khoei gave a fatwa reminding people that this was stolen items. And those Iraqis will know that their place was left with cars. There was no one that would buy these S-classes and these Mercedes because Ayatollah al-Khoei had given a very clear fatwa that they were stolen. That was his standing amongst the Shia. That is why Saddam was so clear in oppressing him. And you can imagine, during this oppression, he writes 90 works. He runs 4 Dars Kharij a day. He does so much excellent work in grooming his students. This is one letter which I found in the archives of the World Federation from the Medical Advisory Board asking or pleading to the Red Cross for help in Ayatollah al-Khoei when he was missing at one point. There are many such archives which are being gathered by the World Federation. Saddam did not systematically only attack the Hawza. He wanted to expel it, but Ayatollah al-Khoei maintained it throughout his lifetime. After the Shia uprising in 1991, Ayatollah al-Khoei was arrested and imprisoned. Some 105 people connected to Ayatollah al-Khoei were also arrested, and many did not make it back. One onlooker saw the arrest of Ayatollah al-Khoei, and he writes, "I watched from a nearby house, and some soldiers captured Imam. 4 members of the leadership went with him. They forced the Imam, over 90 years old, to walk without assistance, causing him to fall repeatedly on the ground." He was imprisoned, later forced to appear on TV with Saddam, very famous, I'm sure a lot of people here will remember it. He was pressurized to give a fatwa in favor of Saddam, but he never wavered. A lot of those close to Ayatollah al-Khoei were attacked. Many were killed to show Ayatollah al-Khoei that it is time to change his mind, but he never wavered. They even beat him in jail, so much so that he had bruises in his body. And after 3 days, they sent him home and kept him under house arrest. The Iraqi government, this is very interesting historically, were prepared for his death. On the day of the death, they cut off all the telephone lines in Kufa and most of the telephone lines in Najaf. It just happened to be on the same day that his health quickly deteriorated and he had severe swelling in his chest which became visible. By the time the doctors came, it was too late. Some declared it cardiac failure, others declared it other things. For some reason, it happened to be that the Iraqi army had already deployed a huge number of people nearby and blocked off all the highways between Najaf and Kufa. They moved in to disperse any crowds that were coming throughout Iraq. State TV announced that on Sunday his funeral would take place, but the Ba'athists at midnight ordered the funeral to take place the following morning. Saturday night his body was washed. Namaz-e-Janazah was recited at the shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which was led by Ayatollah Sistani. under a lot of pressure whilst the Ba'athist soldiers were surrounding the janazah. Only 6 people were allowed to bury him. It happened to be the following day that the telephone lines coincidentally began operating again. Although people say it's heart disease, a lot of commentators now say that there is a likelihood that Ayatollah Khoei was poisoned. Why do they say this? Number one, he left prison only 3 days earlier. He was badly beaten, bruised, threatened by Saddam. Saddam was upset that he didn't speak in favor of the Intifada. Saddam wanted to get rid of Khoei, could not expel him. He was under house arrest, therefore everything given to Ayatollah Khoei was controlled. The electricity lines were already cut off, the telephone lines were cut off before this event happened. There was a heavy presence in the area. They blocked off the roads to Kufa. It literally is too much planning for everything to all be a coincidence. In fact, if you look at it, many Iraqi sensitive dissidents were killed through thallium poisoning. And there are many today who would argue that Ayatollah Khoei is possibly a shaheed. The state argued and said on its TV that a massive funeral took place. Lots of people turned up, including members of the Ba'athists. They declared him a martyr of Iraq. We know that Ayatollah Khoei, throughout his life, was severely oppressed. In fact, they oppressed his family even after he passed away. His son, Syed Muhammad Taqi Khoei, happened to die in a car crash, which was well known as being organized by Saddam. If we look at the legacy of Ayatollah Khoei, first and foremost, his legacy is that he groomed, cultured, nurtured wonderful students all over the world. Students like Sayyid Ali Hussein as-Sistani, who is the marja 450 million today. Students like Sayyid Mohseni, who has built a Najaf, a Hawza in Qum, which is bringing our scholar, a Hawza in Afghanistan, which is bringing so many scholars and so many new alims into the religion. His works. He had excellent developments in the work of Ilmul Rijal and Usul, and produced over 90 works, despite all the oppression, all the events that took place. Thirdly, his legacy is the protection, the maintenance of the Hawza in Najaf. During Ayatollah al-Hakim's time and before him, the British Empire wanted to get rid of the Najaf Hawza. The Ba'athists want to get rid of the Najaf Hawza. But Ayatollah al-Khoei sacrificed so much. As we said, Ayatollah Ishaq Fayyaz today says that the progress of Najaf is to the benefit of the soul of Ayatollah al-Khoei. Ayatollah al-Khoei understood the critical importance of the Hawza in Najaf to us today. And lastly, outreach. He built on the work of Ayatollah Mohsin al-Hakim to build Hussainiyas and Imambaras around the world. He personally developed the Khoei Foundation, and he built up centers under his direction in India, in London, in Jamaica, in Pakistan, and he also supported a lot of causes throughout the world. Sayyid Maulana Rizvi used to say that Bilal, Kenya, was given so much benefit from Ayatollah al-Khoei, not only moral support but financial support as well. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us the right way, to help us protect our madhab, and to increase the life of our scholars, and lastly to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam, Ajalallahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif.